I run a group called the Singapore Sketchers in Singapore, clearly, and one of the theme we're doing at the moment is back alley sketches. Let's begin. I will put a link to the Facebook group in the description below so that you can find the other back alley photographs that I posted for the group to sketch. If you are a resident of Singapore or a ex-resident of Singapore, you feel free to join us. If you are not a resident of Singapore, but if you like to sketch Singapore scenery, you are also free to join us. So let's begin with this technique which I've demonstrated in an earlier video using fountain pen loaded with watercolor to draw. I'll put a description below for the photograph, as well as I will also put a link for this video where you can see how I use this technique of loading my fountain pen, empty fountain pen, with watercolor. In most of these landscape based sketches, you will see that they basically fulfill or follow the rule of perspective. There's an X which I have placed in the sketch, and I'm following the radiating single vanishing point where all the lines are radiating out from that X. You could see that other than the vertical lines, the horizontal line to the ground, they are all radiating from the X that I've marked. It is somewhat a little dot on the slightly to the left, and I'm always conscious of that X, and every line is always radiating out of it. There's going to be a link to a video that I do on perspective as well. You can check that out and get to know a little bit more about perspective as well. One of the problem of beginners is this, right? There's just too much to learn. Well, you can't learn everything in one go, so you got to learn them bits by bit. So what would happen is that as you learn how to draw a little bit better, your perspective may be mangled, and as you progress, your perspective gets to be better. But if you look at some of the earlier sketches that you've done, your perspective may be really bad, and but it doesn't matter. It is a journey. It is a lifelong learning experience. You're alive and you are learning. I mean, what more do you want? Don't get frustrated. Frustration will just slow down your learning, right? So treat it as a norm, as in keeping things simple. Keep it simple, right? And not make it too complicated, and break it down. Learn one bit at a time, and eventually you will learn most of the skills that you need to do a reasonable job, from drawing to perspective to figures to coloring to understanding the shadows to looking at shapes and making interesting and attractive shapes and so on and so forth, right? That's your job in learning them bits by bits, and not to be frustrated along the way. And then of course I see some beginners that they are not learning at all. They are just going at it in gusto, and sketch after sketch they are making the same mistake again and again. Never really take the time to really understand perspective, never really taking the time to understand how to place figures, and never really understand how to make interesting shapes or use the ingredients or the elements of design to make your sketch aesthetically pleasing, right? So all those are problems that you can overcome with a bit of work in that sense. So now, having drawn the scene, as you can see, the photograph I've put there for you, you can now, well, for me, I'm going to go in with the dark first, right? So I'm going to look at the photograph where I see all the darkest dark from a value of 1 to 5. The darkest being 5, I'm going in and put in my potent mixture of phthalo green and permanent alizarin crimson. That is actually one of the darkest value I can create from my palette. I think the reason why it's dark is because phthalo green is staining, and the mixture between dark red, dark green gives me a very, very darkish color. I can push it to warm, i.e. red, or I can push it to cool, i.e. green. And by playing with that, it becomes an interesting dark, because it is not just black one color, but it is actually a shade from red to green, and it's the value of 5 in that sense. So as you can see, I'm just trying to mix that, pushing it sometimes to the cooler side and sometimes to the warmer side. And as you know from my other videos, you know that I sometimes like to go straight, well, not sometimes, most of the time I like to go straight for the shadow part. If you look at a photograph, you can almost read where the shadowy part of the sketch would be. The ground, and on the right hand side, the wall, those are in the shadow. There are some parts of the staircase, those are all in the shadowy part. So I decided to use a combination of Queen Burnt Orange, which gives me brown, and between that and dropping in some of the French ultramarine, which gives me a very nice neutral color, if you like. So again, playing with the cool and warm, cool being blue and then warm being Queen Burnt Orange, and that is the mixture that I'm applying for what I consider being the shadowy part of the sketch. So I progress basically doing the same thing, playing with blue, playing with the brown, and I'm just looking at where I should put more blue, i.e. the cooler side, and as much as possible I'm trying to keep it as fewer shade as possible. There's some green now going in, indicating where I think some of the plants and some of the lighter part of the wall on the left hand side. I ignored the red or the pinkish color, and I'm just going in with the same mixture of brown and so on, which I've already pre-mixed. I intend, from a color scheme perspective, making it mostly brown, some blues, and some slight green here and there, right? So it's a bit of a basic primary color, if you like. Of course, brown can also, fade yellow if you like. So it's basically yellow, blue, green, and red. Those are the colors that I'm going to use here. Although not in very strong sense, right? Going in a bit darker to represent the shadows, soften some of the shapes, to make it more blended to the ground, and some lines radiating again from the same X that I've placed earlier. So at this point, I'm just filling in the blanks. I'm looking at tiny shapes and looking at what other things I need to do to make the sketch come to life, if you like. I decided there's a bit of a orange red rooftop and some lines, and maybe a dot here and there. You've got to remember, it's not very good if you just place one color in one spot. It's always good to echo it and have that same color sort of find echo in other parts of the sketch, so that it's not too lonely. It's terrible if you one color and it's only in one spot. It's just too jarring. Alright, so at this point I think I'm kind of done, so I'm going to put my name, the date, I think just name maybe, and and sort of while I'm doing that, take my time, slow down a little bit, evaluate what I've done, and see whether there's anything else I need to do. I think that's about it. I was considering whether I would use a fountain pen with black ink and to draw all over it, but I decided against it at the end because I think the sketch is probably kind of work at this point, and I should just leave it. One of the hardest thing to do is to decide when to stop a sketch. Of course, the other hard thing to do is to know when to start. So I hope you enjoyed it and stay safe wherever you are. This is Whee Teck out for this week. Bye.